doesn't do very well. Folks,
Yeah.
folks, the vice president of the board here will conduct it if Jason doesn't show up a little bit. We do have a quorum. The members of the
Point of order, sir. How do you have a quorum? I only see 2 people here.
We're not here to argue with you. You may sit down, please. Thank you.
You do not have a quorum, sir, so you cannot conduct business without a quorum.
We have a quorum.
Point of order, there is no quorum.
Who are the members that are quorum?
Yeah, please identify
point that
the
out.
quorum.
James Breka here is here. Bob Williams is here. And we have a new member, Virginia Murphy, who has been sworn in as a director.
When
When
is she
was that
sworn in?
meeting?
Because it's not a,
Today.
she needs to be sworn in as at a public
She's
meeting.
been sworn in today.
In a public meeting.
That's not
It needs to be
necessary in a
voted.
public meeting. I'm sorry.
You did it for Bob.
This lady is sworn in.
You
Now,
did it for
We're
Bob.
not going to argue.
You've already notarized that because you had to notarize it for Bob too.
This is done. Now, let's proceed with our meeting.
This is the biggest part. I'm just gonna say right now, this is what we've been dealing with for years with Jason as board president. This is a farce. You all can hold your meeting and give your information and give your input, but just know this is not a legal meeting right now.
Folks, I want to apologize to you for this situation. We have a resigned director who has resigned because he doesn't like the president. The president
It's
isn't
very
here
difficult to
today,
hear you.
But
Can you speak up?
Yeah, we really can't hear you.
why don't we move a table or two up here where we can, everybody can hear? Get chairs back up here.
Just scoot your tables up too.
Can some of you help those that can't hear, move closer to the front?
If you give us a minute, we'll give you a PA system that you can use, okay?
No, it's not important. Yeah, I'm gonna take care of that.
It's my understanding they're trying to find a PA system.
No,
So we're waiting just a
Bob,
minute.
that's not how they put Bob in. They made him sit out of the meeting. They voted him in the public meeting and then swore him in later. I don't even know if he was sworn in. So we're not consistent. They can't approve the application. And even if they can, it's not consistent. That's not what they've done all along. That's not what they did with Bob.
They'll run over you if you don't.
While we're waiting for
They got
that,
their swear someone in. I don't know if you, I'll go over this. I don't know if you guys know, that Monday night when it was canceled, Jason did not call the accountant's attorney and cancel with that. He planned on having a private meeting here with that. And we stuck around and used
Can you guys hear okay? Is that good? Do we turn up anymore? In the back?
It's perfect. That's great, thank you.
Okay, turn it over to Amanda.
This is Heather, she's the commander of the American Legion.
Thank you.
Folks, I want to introduce the folks here.
Now you gotta hold the mic up to your mouth, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry, thank you. I'm not I usually make enough noise that I don't have to use one of these, sorry. We have here tonight, folks, to kind of brief anybody that's interested over what's going on and what the district is and what the experts think needs to be done and how it can be done and how financing can be obtained and whether or not grants will be available to do it. The district, as most of you may know, is a political corporation in the state. It is not a private company. As a political corporation in the state, it's part of the government, it's a governmental entity, but its sole function is to provide water service for the residents of the area which is within the corporation, within the corporate limits of the district. This district has been in existence for some time. I am new here. I have just been employed. My name is Bill McCaffrey. I'm an attorney. I do an awful lot of rural water and sewer work. Represent at the moment, I think, 31 entities that do this kind of thing. And it's kind of been my work the last 20 years or so to try to help organize these things and keep people, or keep them running and arrange financing and that kind of thing. We've got with us here Mr. Jerry Jeske, who is an engineer, and I embarrass him by explaining that Mr. Jeske was formerly as a private individual hired by the United States government to look at engineering plans of other engineers in Missouri and to tell the federal government whether they should be financed or not. In my opinion, you have, I deal with companies now that have some probably 12, 13 different engineering firms. In my opinion, you've got one of the best engineers for your district. He's just been employed. I have just been brought aboard. Our CPA is sitting here. Stand up and identify yourself.
Alan Nippes, I'm CPA out of Springfield, Missouri.
Mr. Nippes does the financing for the district to make sure that it's done properly. He audits the books, makes sure that money is where it's supposed to be and that it's properly handled. Now, it's my understanding that there's some kind of an emergency the president of the board had.
He's actually on
But he's coming. What we've done in order to try to fill you in on what's going on and what the circumstances are, the vice president here has asked me to say what I've said to try to explain, and we will have some questions and answers later to try to help you. But the first thing we're going to do, if it's agreeable with you all, is have your engineer talk a little bit about the district, about what you've got in terms of engineering, what you've got in facilities, whether it measures up, what really needs to be done for the future, and with growth, what needs to be done and how it might be financed. And he'll do that first, and then we'll go from there and see if we can provide some other information. And as soon as the president gets here, we'll go on with the regular meeting.
Has the meeting been called to order yet, or not?
I don't know that it makes any difference with meeting. Thank you, though.
And you're a lawyer.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, didn't necessarily expect to be put on stage here, but Bill's asked me to give a quick rundown. Oh, you just showed up. Saved by the bell.
Sorry about that.
We've asked the engineers, the folks over there about the system first. The President wants us to go ahead and get this explanation out so that your questions are answered, your concerns as much as possible. And we'll go ahead with that briefly, and then we'll go into the meeting. All right, thank you.
Bill's asked me to give a quick rundown of the system. I know some of you have been here many years and have been maybe on the board, have been a customer for quite some time. You're probably very familiar with their system. Their system has 2 groundwater wells. It has a series of reservoirs and tanks, most notably a standpipe that provides pressure to the system. The system has a lot of elevation change, as you're well aware of, and so there's a lot of pressure reducing valves throughout the system, and there's also a booster pump station that pumps water from the standpipe up toward the higher elevations. So all in all, the system has what it needs to operate and provide water. However, the system is reaching, nearing the end of its useful life, and that's why leaks come about, and the operations are, constantly out there looking to fix leaks, getting those repaired, and why the district has employed Olson to do a study of the system and come up with some recommendations. The first study that I did, was several years ago. It's got some age now, but a lot of the same recommendations remain. That is, replacing some of the main arteries in the town, or in the district system, of course, which serves the west side of town, and if possible, construct an elevated water tank with enough storage to ensure that everyone has good pressure throughout the high seasons, the high demand seasons, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's also a lot of other dynamics going on, of course, with businesses along Highway 13 wanting fire protection, with other water systems on the east side of 13. There's a lot of dynamics at play. I'll admit this, it's not nearly as straightforward as anyone is making it out to be. The district has applied for funding to get grant money to do another engineering study to take a look at things now that the previous study's got 6 or 7 years on it. Take a look at things and see how it's doing now, see how, now we've come back out of the pandemic, what does the development situation look like, and where does the district need to concentrate its investment. Looking back at the main nuts and bolts of the investment that was recommended a few years ago, that number now, with inflation that's taken place and so forth, is up around $5 or $6 million worth of investment that needs to be done. But we're learning about some new developments every month, and that's why we need to do another report and kind of see what makes the most sense for the direction moving ahead.
Did you mention anything on finances?
Not yet.
Tell me the options. Folks, to get money to build these things, what we usually do, there's 3 sources. The first one is the United States government through the Farmers Home Administration. They specialize in providing money for rural water systems and development. They have developed a great portion of Missouri. How many rural water districts do we have in Missouri right now? My last count was 247, but I think there's more. That's an old count. But most of southern Missouri, surprisingly, because it's wooded, there's a great lot of southern Missouri that's not developed. Northern Missouri is almost all developed. I represent several districts up almost to the Iowa line, but it is almost covered with rural water districts.
Now, the second source of funds to try to build water systems in a rural area is the Missouri DNR. They have a state revolving fund that has recently, I'm sorry, with my age, recently means within the last 10 years. But that has been developed by the state, and it has been a godsend for a number of reasons, because they are able to provide money at a little bit less than the federal government can provide it on occasions. And they have had massive amounts of grant money to hand out to build these systems. There's a third method of financing with private financing. Private financing with the interest rates that are now available has been a marvelous option for districts that are really sound financially. Money in the bank type districts. The reason that it's a good thing on private financing is that if you do federal or state financing, there's an awful lot of paperwork to put together, and the governmental entities that provide funds are very careful about what they do so that they're not subject to criticism. And they want engineering and legal clearances. They want to know that there's an easement for every line of pipe that you're going to install, and that there's contracts with customers that are going to use water. They are not in the business of going out and building water systems so that developers can make money. The governmental loans are made in order to provide existing residents with needed potable water to replace systems that are becoming subject to contamination or just simply risky. But the third way of doing it is private financing. The problem is even with today's interest rate, it's usually at 1 or just a little bit more percent more expensive than governmental financing. As to the term of financing, believe it or not, the USDA will finance these projects for up to 33 to 35 years, which is marvelous because the payments are low and you can keep your water charges at a reasonable rate and pay it over a long period of time with a very low interest rate. The state revolving fund and the Missouri DNR likes 20 years loans. They like 10 if they can get them, but they'll usually talk to you about 10 or 20. But if you get them cornered and can justify it, you can get a little bit more out of the state. But you've got to know what you're doing, and you've got to be there to fuss about it, and you've got to justify it. But you can do that. So you've got three sources to finance it. Now, how are they financed? A rural water district is a governmental entity. It cannot go to a bank and sign a note. And we can't, for that reason, the only way a governmental entity can finance anything, well, there's a lease purchase arrangement that's an exception, but it's not used a lot. But the major way that financing for governmental entities is done is that the governmental entity must ask the voters to authorize the governmental entity to borrow money. Now, that doesn't mean that they're borrowing money, and this district today is going to consider an ordinance which would allow that to be submitted to a vote. But there has to be a public election on the issue of whether the district can or cannot borrow money. If the voters don't approve it, you're dead. If the voters approve it, then the board of directors has an obligation to do engineering, find out what's necessary, have their board of directors decide what's practical in the sense of trying to keep the water rates reasonable, and at that point to construct the improvements to a district or to build the facilities of the district. The governmental entities that control this require bonded contractors. They normally require that the job be bid publicly, and that the contract be awarded. It used to be to the lowest and best bidder, the modern language, some of you guys that do construction work, I see one guy grinning back there, they call it it's now not the lowest and best, but the most responsive and responsible bidder. And I think they use those words, so if somebody comes in to bid a job that you're a little bit worried that they may not be able to build it, that you can look into the background and see if they've taken bankruptcy or one thing or another, and try to be sure that you've got a contractor that can do what needs to be done, okay? That's that. Alan, can you talk a little bit to the crowd for just a minute? Not too long because we're ready to start the meeting, but can you talk to them for just a minute about how the funds of the district are managed and what controls there are on the treasurer, and how the governmental entity, the district itself, operates to manage the financing?
Hello, my name is Alan Nippes. I'm CPA. I try to make eye contact, but if I look down at my feet, it's just because I'm an accountant. It's not because I'm trying to avoid you. I'm new to the district as well, starting maybe in February or March. And so I'm learning too, but in general, our office has been tasked with, the district has outsourced our office and provided us with the marching orders to maintain custody of the general ledger system for the district, reconcile the bank accounts, process the payroll, process the payroll tax payments, etc. So that function is being outsourced. We don't sign any checks, we don't approve any bills, we maintain our independence in that regard, but we do review all of the expenditures that have been paid, the payroll expenses that have been paid, etc. And then we report to the board of directors every month, at the end of every month, what the profit and loss, what the assets and liabilities are for a given month, and give comments. There are some improvements. There have been actually a fair amount of changes even since we started with the employee structure, and since we started and historically. And so there is some room for improvement on internal controls internally, and process and procedures that just need to be developed as systems grow and develop, or people take a look at them. So that's a work in process, but that's something that we will be focused on as we have gotten a better handle on the finances and understand some of the weaknesses in internal controls and some of the areas for improvement. There are no gaping holes or any instances of fraud or misappropriation of assets that we have seen. And that's not our primary source or primary focus, or not what we're engaged to do primarily, but it is an area that we are watching. Our concern is not in that area. Our concern is really just forward-looking, the financials of the district. Do we have rates that are sufficient to meet the operating expenses in the future? What are we going to do? There's no outstanding debt, but what are we going to do if there's significant expenditures that will require borrowed money in the future? I don't know exactly what that will be until we get an engineer's report. But we do have some concerns that we've shared with the board, and we'll be happy to discuss any questions. And that's one of our focus areas, is how are we going to be able to maintain fiscal operations in a way that is sustainable in the future. I don't know if we're taking questions now, Bill, or
The president has asked me to see if I can get a general idea of 5 major issues that there will be questions about from the customers or the members. And so we're not going to answer them right now, but we're going to try to select 5 questions that we will assemble the appropriate responses for you at the end of the meeting. Do any of you have something that is bothering you, or that you are worried about, or that you would like to know that we haven't informed you about thus far? Come on. Sir.
I would like to know about the solvency and whether I'm gonna have water. I know I've got water today, and every time there's a leak, it's fixed, and the service has been great and all that. But I wanna know if it's gonna be water tomorrow, and if not, what's the plan for, making sure we have water tomorrow?
May I have your first name?
Charlie.
What?
Charlie?
Charlie. We got Charlie's questions is a good one. Anybody else, what would you like to know about?
I'd like to know what you got in reserve funds for doing maintenance and repairs.
Currently?
Pardon me?
At the present time, you mean?
Yes. What you're looking forward for future also.
Okay, that's a bit, can you give me a first name just a
Joe.
second?
Joe,
Joe. That's really an interesting question because both the federal and state government handle that the same way and have some requirements that you're going to be interested to hear about. Let's see about other questions. Sir?
Are you gonna let the audience know that there's also other choices besides the district going out for bonds and doing it themselves, which for 60 years has put us in this situation? Because you guys keep talking around that, but there's also other choices out there besides voting for a bond. You could vote for other items, other things.
Do you have some particular option that you think's better?
Dissolution, do I have what? Say that again, sir?
You're talking about dissolution of the district?
Yes, yes. With the letter of intent that's already been signed by the board president.
We can address that issue. We're not going to argue with anybody about whether things should or should not be done, but we're going to comment about the options and try to provide truthful information as to what could or could not be done. Do you understand? But we're not going to engage in an argument with anybody here that is here to raise Cain. That's not the purpose here. The purpose is to truthfully tell you what's going on and why.
That's why we asked the question.
And I've got it down here, and we're going to have that one of the answers for you. Any more? I got three. We got two more.
Can you apply for grants as well as getting private money?
The expert on the grants is sitting right here, and we can talk about GRANTS, and give me a first name.
Tom.
Bob?
Tom.
Tom. Dissolution, can I have a first name?
Richard.
Thank you, Richard. How about a fourth issue? We want to know about what you really are concerned about, why you're here, what brought you to this meeting, and we want to make sure you've got the information that you came for. Ma'am.
I would just like to know, from the short time that I've been involved with PWSD and being on the long-term planning committee, everything revolved around we want our rates to be low. So with this rate increase and with a future rate increases, if you do a bond, I want to know if that's going to still, if our rates are still going to be low. Because I believe there's other options out there where our rates can be low.
We'll address the rates, and you want to talk about the options of who can do it most efficiently, right? Rates and efficiency. Could I have a first name?
Dawn.
John?
Dawn.
Dawn. D-A-W-N? I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
We got you, Dawn. All right, we've got 5 excellent questions that will be challenging, but we've got expertise here that can really fill you in on the pros and cons. And we'll tell you truthfully the good and the bad, and you can at least go home with what knowledge we have. But we're going to go to the meeting first and do that.
Can I ask one more question, or
Yes,
do we have
ma'am.
5? Do we have 5?
We got 5.
Okay, never mind.
You want another one?
Well, I just
If
want to
there's
know.
time, we'll try.
I just want to know if this water district is focused only on residents, or if they're concerned with the overall good of the community as a whole, as far as developing and working towards a future.
And that's Dawn number 2, right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's 6 good issues, so that'll be interesting to try to get that information for you. I want to turn it over to the president here, and he's going to conduct a meeting, and they've got some business that they need to do. Now, there is an area in their meeting in which they invite public comment if you want to. They're not here to argue or to justify. They're here to learn from the public and find out what the public wants to say. They're not here to respond or justify or try to sell you one way or the other. But they will allow people to comment. You'll be limited to 3 minutes in that period of time if you want to use the opportunity. But we will take these questions at the end of the system and see what we can do. Mr. President.
Okay, for starters, I want to apologize for being late. I probably don't smell very good. I've been up in a sign all day trying to do a rehab that needed to be done today. So that's the reason why I'm late. I'm usually not late for meetings. People who've been to a lot of meetings know I don't miss. I'm rarely ever late. I understand that prior to me coming in, Virginia Murphy had applied for a position on the board, and there was some concern as to whether or not she could be appointed. So first item on the agenda, I'd ask that we amend the agenda to include Virginia Murphy appointment as a new board member.
Point of order, the meeting has not been called to order.
Okay, we're gonna call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. And I would like to ask for an amendment to the agenda to include, between items A and B, the appointment of the new board member. And motion, second? Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Okay, we will add. No? First item on the agenda is to appoint Virginia Murphy. She had applied for a position on the board. I've known Virginia for a number of years. Known her husband too. They live up the street from me. Virginia, can you tell the board why you want to be a board member?
Because I have concerns over our.
I have concerns over our water system as well. I've lived here since 2008, so I'm kind of familiar with some of the issues that we deal with, and so I just want to be involved and try to help resolve some of the issues.
Anybody on the board have questions for Virginia? I'd entertain a motion that we appoint Virginia as a board member. We have one empty spot. Have a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Welcome aboard.
Can you state what sub-district she's in?
Amanda?
Oh, it's sub-district 3, I'm sorry. I believe that is correct.
I think she's 5.
I think she is.
Bob is 3, Leonard is 2.
She's in sub-district 3, but she'll be representing 5
Right.
until we have an election.
Thank you.
Item B, approval of minutes of the regular meeting held August 8th. They were in your packets. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes as read?
Second?
Motion been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. We're going to move on to financial report. Alan? You guys have all met Alan. You just want to talk about our finances?
Okay, for the board of directors, you have, all of you should have, if you don't, let me know. You should have a packet that has 3 things. One is a schedule of disbursements, and those were all the disbursements for the month of July. You should have a payroll schedule that shows all the payroll that was paid in July. It's a lot simpler now since there's just really one W-2 employee. And then you have a larger financial statement that's several pages stapled together. Everybody have that? So if you want to start with your disbursements, you can see that the disbursements, all disbursements, whether that was utilities, payrolls, repairs and maintenance, internet, et cetera, was $32,828.42. And you can see the itemized list there if you have any questions. The next question is the payroll, and again, we just have one employee's paid wages, and I included both July and year-to-date wages for everybody who has been paid for your review. Are there any questions on those, or do you want a minute or two to go over them before I go over the financial report itself? Good? Okay, so now if you'll turn.
You got to talk directly into it.
I think I turned it off. All right. Can you hear me? All right, this is for the board, but I want everybody to be able to hear. So we have financial statement, and just like prior months, you have, these are just internal, they're not internal, they're our internal financial statements, so they're not audited or reviewed, but they have been prepared based on a review of all the transactions and the bank statements review, and the bank statements have been reconciled and all cash is accounted for. So that's a short way of saying they're accurate. And I'll start with it's called Statement of Financial Position, but just as a reference, since you're a water district, that's what we would call a balance sheet in for-profit accounting, and it's just simply listing your assets and your liabilities and your net worth. It's called net position for us. And you can see that the cash position, cash in the bank accounts, $47,028 at the end of July. Total certificates of deposit, $291,000 at the end of July and change. And so that total is about $40,000 in total, give or take, between the two. For your reference, the annual expenditures for the district can vary considerably depending on the repairs and maintenance every month that we incur. But in general, it's somewhere between $350,000 and $450,000. So my guesstimate would be this is probably 9 to 12 months worth of reserves. It's not labeled specifically as reserve, it's just cash and CDs, but that's what it is, and that's how long it would last based on the current spending rate. You also see accounts receivable and construction material. Those speak for themselves. Accounts receivable is water that's been billed but not yet paid by the customers. Construction materials is just valves, pipe, and other equipment that is on hand at the district to deal with repairs. You can see so the total current assets, $409,000 and change. You can see the capital assets, which doesn't have a ton of value to you because these are recorded at historical cost. And again, I reminded you last month, these are wells and standpipes and distribution lines and equipment in the building, any pressure reducing valve, all the equipment that the district has recorded at its historical cost and an estimated depreciation. So we see the net capital assets is about $500,000, but again, that has no bearing on fair market value. And total assets for the district is $902,000, fairly consistent with prior year. If we look at the liabilities, you can see there is no outstanding debt for the district, no loans payable. You see some payroll taxes payable and some accrued expenses for bills that have been received but not paid. And then the biggest liability at $67,000 is the customers' meter deposits that the district maintains on behalf of the customers. So total liabilities of $87,000, and that gives you a net worth or net position of $815,000. Any questions on assets or liabilities? There have been no major changes on these assets or liabilities from last month. And then we'll flip over to the next page. And now we're seeing statement of revenues and expenses for the month of July. And you'll see two columns on here. One is for July and one is year to date. Last month, I don't remember what the exact profit was, but last month was a little different because for the first 5 months of the year, we were running at a loss every month, running in the red. In June, it was a profitable month. And you'll see in July, not by a lot, but July was also a profitable month. There was a little less than $44,000 collected in revenue. The vast majority of that was just water sales to customer. There were a little bit extra on late charges. So total revenue about $44,000. You can see the itemized listing of the expenses, which in total is $34,057. And if you have a question about why your disbursement schedule was $32,000 and change, and this is $34,000 and change, there's a very small difference there, and it's simply because the financial statement you're looking at is on the accrual basis, and some of these checks are recorded when they're paid, but they may not be cashed by customers, and so your disbursement list is the checks that were paid. And the accrual basis always has, difference between accrual and cash basis always has some small differences. You can see your biggest expense by far for the month of July, and that's consistent with year to date, was system maintenance and repairs. Just shy of $21,000 in July, $149,000 year to date. The other big expenses would be payroll, and I would include professional fees for that, for accounting and legal, because that's really paying for professional fees and employees, and utilities. Those are your three big expenses. By far the single biggest expenses you can see, system maintenance and repair. But $34,000 in total for operating expenses, you compare that to the just shy of $44,000 in revenue collected, and there was a $9,900 profit for the month of July. We add a little bit to that for interest income on the CDs of $783,000, and that left you with a profit, $10,695. That has drawn down, and that's for July. If you look at the year-to-date column, you can see $245,000 of total revenue. We were hoping and budgeting and projecting for about $400,000 in revenue, give or take. Since we're new, that is a guesstimate, that's our best guess. And I think you're on pace for that. I'm not sure about the total expenses. There's just a lot of fluctuation right now in maintenance and repairs expense, and that's driving a lot of what the expense is on the budget. That's driving some uncertainty on what the total expenses will be and whether there's a loss. You do see, however, that even with these last 2 months at profit, we are running at a loss of about just shy of $48,000 for the year. So the cash balances have been drawn down by $48,000. That has stemmed itself for the last 2 months and been profitable. Whether or not that's sustainable, again, depends on really probably the maintenance and repairs that you incur for the rest of the year. That's really what's driving, and that's the most unpredictable expense that you have. And that's kind of it for revenues and expenses for July and year to date. What questions do you have? No? Okay, Jason, I think I've covered all the items on that agenda for me.
I'd entertain a motion to approve the disbursements of $32,882.42.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Amanda, did you have anything else to add to the financial? You being the office manager?
We did visit, we did have to buy a new printer, which is not working, so that's fine. I really don't have anything else. Alan and I are pretty constant communication, nothing weird or, out of the ordinary. But no, I've got nothing else. I'm good, thank you.
Okay, well, we'll move on to operations report. Mona?
Okay, well, we've had several large repairs, as many of you know, that I've had the alerts out there, and, but hopefully that's kind of slowing down a little bit. Okay, hopefully we're slowing down some on the repairs. We will have a couple going on tomorrow, but the total number of gallons pumped seems to be pretty going down to what we had been, so that means I think we're getting ahead of some of our repairs. We've also, in some places, if we've gone in there a couple of times to dig and it's right together, we've replaced more line than probably what we would have normally done if we just done a repair. So hopefully that will make that spot not a spot that we go back to for a while. We've been trying to fix yards as we go, so we're not having to come back and tear up or straighten up a yard a month or two later. So hopefully that's more appealing to you also. The loss rate, I'm hoping, will go down since we have gotten some of these larger repairs done. It has helped that you all call when you do see something. I mean, it may not turn out to be anything, but at least we can check it out. We do have, I do have what I call a leak list after I read meters. Usually if it's over 10,000 gallons is what I print out, and if somebody's usage has gone way up, you get a phone call from us saying, check out what's going through your meter. I know we had a gentleman the other day we called and he gone from like 2,000 to 44,000. So he's happy that we called. If you have your usage, you seem like that it's like double, triple, you can call, and I can always check that list and tell you if you're on it. Because sometimes if you're only like 800 gallons and your usage goes up to 3,000 gallons, I won't notice that as a major problem because I'm looking for the ones that make huge jumps in. But like I said, you're more than welcome to call. I don't feel comfortable posting that out for everybody to see as far as just having it out there. Because then, you know, I don't want somebody accusing you of using water that you shouldn't be. So that I think is about all I have. Oh, I'm sorry, I do have lead and copper. We've talked about that some. This is a report that's required by the EPA. It's not required by me. It does require your input on it, and that's why we have issued a survey to get that information so we can compile it, and appreciate all of your help getting it back to us as soon as possible so we can get that report in the works, finished up, and on the way to fulfill that requirement, because that is a legal requirement. That's not something that we may make. The current loss, based upon the August readings, then it includes flushing and leaks taken off of it. For unaccounted loss, we had 39%. So I think, you know, that hopefully with getting rid of some of those leaks, we keep that going down also.
Do you have the pumped and the sold numbers, the raw numbers?
I'm sorry?
Do you have the raw numbers for pumped and sold?
Yes. Hang on. Okay, pumped this month of August was 11,327,923, and sold was 4,171,890.
Is that for August or July?
That is August.
86,000 flushed and roughly 2.5 million in leaks.
That was repaired, yes. July, in contrast, you had 11,152,380, sold 3,953,310. Your flushing was 39,994 and 3,440,841 in leak loss.
But isn't that the other way around though? Isn't it? If it's 4 million sold, and 11 million pumped, isn't that about 38% accounted for? Not accounted for?
No, this is, I'm sorry. 3,953,310 was sold.
Anybody have any questions on the board for Mona? Any questions for Mona on the operations report? Okay, we're going to go into the open forum portion of the meeting. Some of the things that are obviously going to be discussed is the potential rate increase that will get voted on tonight. In the first 6 months of this year, we made massive repairs, a lot of repairs. We found that we purchased a new sound device that allowed us to locate leaks much easier, much more accurate. And when we had a operations manager on staff, he made an immense number of repairs, which drew our obvious repair costs up in that first 6 months. Those repairs, along with PRV replacements and improvements, shut-off valves so we're not cutting off entire neighborhoods at a time. These were all things that were much needed to be done. We completed those in those first 6 months. Unfortunately, we don't have them on staff anymore. But Alan has come up with, when we brought him on as an accounting firm, we asked him to produce a rate study for us to determine where the rates need to be. There's been multiple meetings, multiple discussions. We had him go back and do a little bit more homework on coming up with various different methodologies to set the rate based on some input from the board. Last meeting that we had talked about the rate, we were looking at a $30 base rate with a $6.50 volumetric on each 1,000 gallons. It'd be a significant increase to what we currently have, but it will allow us to bank money, get money back in the reserve, and allow us to plan for future line replacements, and potentially, if we get the bond issue passed, that would be our co-payment on any grants that we would get. Without that money in the bank, that's makes it really hard for us to get those grant money, because usually there's some matching funds that are required. The other thing that was discussed in the last few meetings that probably would be some subject matter being discussed in the open forum is a while back we did enter in a letter of intent with Missouri American. The board voted on it, it passed, we signed the letter of intent. Missouri American gathered a significant amount of information from the water district and did not return to another meeting after that. We have since had a board member reach out to Missouri American and see where we're at on that. The 180-day letter of intent limitation to exclusively talk to them has expired, but we still want to find out where they're at and where we can move forward. The concept of Missouri American would be that the water district would dissolve. Missouri American would take over the assets. It requires a vote of the people, it requires approval from a judge. And then Missouri American would then run and own the assets of the water district. Given the size of their company, it's not a bad option. It's one of many options that we have going forward. Did you want to elaborate on your conversation with Missouri American?
Just to say that we opened our discussion with what we both thought of each side, what had happened, and I think we cleared up some issues, and we're both looking forward to meeting again. Unfortunately, he was going to come this past week, but I got COVID, so we postponed that. We're looking at a time in the future now. We have to get his schedule together with ours, and then we will be sitting down and having this discussion about what it would look like if we were to move forward.
Some of the questions the public had for me on it, there's been discussion about fire flow, that Missouri American could potentially produce fire flow. So that would be one of the questions we would obviously engage with them. Is fire flow something that's possible, and what kind of time frame would we be looking in the neighborhoods down Highway 13? I know the city has been working on trying to get fire flow down 13 too, so it would be a benefit to them too. So obviously the discussion needs to continue on, and that is definitely one of the options. I'm going to open up the room to 3 minutes at a time. If anybody wants to address the board, they're more than welcome. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go through those first. Richard Garner, you had submitted a request.
Yes.
We'll do those first.
Real quick question. Jason, in your opinion, have your employees, notably the office manager and recent but former employee Debbie Schaff, acted in a professional and courteous manner to all district customers?
You're referring to the one employee that's no longer with us?
I'm referring to both.
Okay.
while she was employed and the one that's currently employed? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to address some ongoing issues in regards to communications and actions by certain employees and others closely associated with PWSD number 1. Just over a week ago, a recent but former employee, Debbie Schaff, slandered myself on social media as she accused me of attempting to get her fired during her employment with PWSD. During her employment, Ms. Schaff replied to a customer's Facebook comment by saying, and I quote, "What is wrong with you other than a lot?" I did admonish Ms. Schaff for her unprofessional behavior and stated that the board should address her behavior quickly and firmly. As an employee, Ms. Schaff and her husband have engaged on many occasions in the name-calling of district customers on social media. Let me be very clear. I am a homeowner and customer in this district. As such, I have afforded every right to attend open meetings, question the operations and viability of our water department, as well as request records and information whenever I want. Under no uncertain terms should myself or any customer of the district be subjected to the harassment, bullying, or attempted intimidation tactics of any employee or official with this water district. Yet it has happened on numerous occasions to myself and other customers by employees, an employee spouse, a board member's spouse, and fake accounts. Just by being a part of these meetings for the little over a year, it isn't difficult to deduce these fake accounts are tied to the water district. Just a few short months ago, this board and its attorney put a big production during an open meeting about the claim of one of its employees being harassed. All while those guilty of harassment and intimidation sat there at those tables with their heads down, unwilling to look at the audience, most likely because of their own guilt. A few months ago, I emailed a request to speak at an open meeting. After some time, I sent a follow-up email to the PWSD office manager for confirmation that my request had been in fact received. Your office manager replied with confirmation, but proceeded to tell me to be sure, and I quote, "Form my question in the form of a question, not a statement or accusation." I took issue with this, and I emailed the board and her, and in my reply I copied every board member at the time, which included the current president, Jason Hulling, James Breka, William Twiggs, and Lenny Spogus, to inform them that I felt as if the office manager was attempting to violate my First Amendment rights, and that my hope was this would never happen again to anyone else who wasn't willing to stick up for themselves. To date, I have never received a single reply from any of you board members. Approximately a week after this happened, and while at my job, my department director came to my desk and asked me to go with him to his office. Upon entering, I found our organization's attorney and the director of human resources. The reason I was called in was to be informed that the office manager of PWSD had filed a harassment complaint and accused me of using my organization's equipment to email and request records from PWSD1, and that I was representing my company at open board meetings. Needless to say, I was furious, because I knew the accusations were completely untrue and that the PWSD office manager was retaliating against me because of my email to her board of directors. Unlike the leadership at PWSD, the leadership at my organization is extremely professional and highly knowledgeable at what they do. After their investigation, which included watching the posted videos of the board meetings, which I had spoke, they wanted to let me know that I had done nothing wrong. My job, my place of employment has absolutely nothing to do with PWSD. This again is retaliation and intimidation by an employee of this district. I will certainly stand up for myself, but what if this happens to a customer that will not stand up for themselves? This egregious behavior and lack of oversight by this board is despicable. I have yet to decide if I'm going to seek out legal counsel for this attempted intimidation and harassment by the water district, but I've had enough and it stops here right now. The blame lies squarely on the shoulders of every board member at the time, Jason Hulling, James Breka, and Lenny Spogus, who have done absolutely nothing to stop the abhorrent behavior of its employees and others associated with the water district. As a matter of fact, the spouse of one of the board members regularly makes disparaging remarks to district customers on social media. The culture here at PWSD is embarrassing, and you should be ashamed. Jason Hulling, your lack of ethical leadership, gross incompetence, and negligence has become a liability to every customer in this district, and because of that, I'm asking for your immediate resignation, along with your personal employees, James Breka, who you appointed to the board, as well as Lenny Spogus. Whether you like it or not, customers of this district have every right to hold every one of you accountable. You are a public board of public employees who work for the customers of PWSD. Thank you.
Next person is, Karina.
I'm gonna touch a little bit on what Richard, said and expand on that. This board is an embarrassment. I feel bad for Bob and Virginia that are joining in on this, and I'm gonna direct my comments at Bill McCaffrey, the attorney. In May, when John Dowdy resigned, it got brought up about a harassment. You made a comment that what the customers were doing was considered felony harassment. And folks, you wanna know what happened that night at 10:30? Debbie Schaaf, who was still an employee of this water district, called the Kimberly City Police Department and filed a harassment complaint, a false harassment complaint against me as a customer. I got a call that Friday from Officer Walker asking me my side of the story. I had to take time out of my day. I own my own business. I don't get lunch breaks. I don't get breaks. I had to take time out of my day and spend 45 minutes talking to Officer Walker about a ridiculous harassment complaint that was incited by your attorney for this board, because you said that harassment of employees was considered felony harassment, and I have a recording of you saying it. I was then requested by the officer to spend my weekend composing my statement and putting it in writing. So I spent my one day off that I have in a week writing a statement of what exactly happened, because Ms. Schaaf had parked her car in front of the board with the announcement, the only accessible announcement, because this office opens at 8:30 and closes at 4:30 and is closed for an hour. So no person who is employed is able to access the front door, and it's not posted on the website. I spent an entire day composing my statement to respond to a false police report that she made. I then get contacted by Chief Lemoyne on Monday morning that she has since rescinded, very officially and very legally sounded. So obviously she had been consulted either by Jason or the attorney or some other legal counsel that she should be rescinding that false police report. Now, as far as the audience, why is this important to you? Because this all relates to sunshine violations. And if they can sit here and use their board members' wives, their employees and their employees' wives and fake accounts to intimidate, defame, and harass the customers of this water district, they're gonna do it to all of you. Every single one of you. If you ever speak up, you are gonna become a target. And because we have sat here for a year coming to these meetings and holding you accountable for things that you stand in public meetings at the city meetings and harass and berate them, ask for their resignations, you are doing the exact same thing, Jason, and you should be ashamed, and I'm calling for your resignation also. And I'm calling for the termination of Bill McCaffrey for your harassment, and I may be seeking counsel also.
We're gonna open it up to anybody else in the room.
I'm gonna read mine, so I don't forget anything. Let me get where I can see. This board needs to face the fact that 40 years of poor management has put PWSD in a position that is not sustainable. There was no planning for future growth or line replacement, just system maintenance. This rate increase is needed, but does nothing but put another patch on a system that is slowly failing. You talk about revenue bonds, but that is not a realistic option. Grants are not normally available for a city in this in a county with such a high income rate. Because of the lake, we have over $50,000 as average income. That is a rate that would not allow grants normally. It's too high. We're considered a rich county and a rich city, even though we aren't necessarily. But that is the numbers that the census put out. Also, bonds will require an untouchable reserve, which you do not have, a fairly large untouchable reserve. And a $5 million bond, I spoke to our treasurer at the city. He said a $5 million bond would cost probably about $400,000 a year, divided by 845 means your rates are gonna go up $40 just to pay for that $5 million rate, or $5 million revenue bond. At a minimum, you need to allow a company such as Missouri American or anyone to come in and present what they can do for PWSD. Let them hold public meetings and state the case and then put it to a vote to the district. It is not right that the four of you are making the decision that actually applies to everybody in this district. And in response to the lawyer's statement earlier, he mentioned there were 3 ways to get money. 2, he said, after going through a really long explanation, the government options are 2. He said lots of paperwork and they're hard to get. So, okay. The other one is private, and he said it has to be a very sound system, which you're not, and a high interest rate. So technically he gives you 3 options, and yet he basically then turns around and says they're not really options available due to either a sound system or the government is very hard to get. And so I just don't see that as an option. And the other thing is, even if you do get a grant, $5 million, I think if you actually, engineer really talks about it, $5 million is basically just a drop in the bucket for what the system needs. It needs full replacement, starting at the beginning and working on it, so.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yep, right here, me. My name is Bill Twigs. Go ahead and take the pictures. Go right ahead. You're gonna do it anyway. All right, I've been on the board before. I was on it years ago. So, here's the problem. It's not the board. Everybody's done everything right. No, is there problems? Yes. It's called the Concerned Citizens of PWSD 1. What happens is they want to spread lies and everything else. Look, if you have questions, go to the water department, talk to them during the week. Usually they'll answer your questions if you have questions. Don't wait and start talking on concerned citizens, because then all they've been doing is arguing and they get people mad. Look, as a board member, and I will tell you for a fact, I would always talk to my neighbors. When I was on the board, they said, hey, what's going on with this? And I would talk to them and explain to them situations, whatever they wanted to know. I would help them, okay, if they had questions about things. Now, if it was a bill, I would say, hey, you go to the water department, they'll explain it to you. But if we were doing something, I would actually say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we're trying to do to make things better, or what we're trying to do to get things done, okay? I didn't start a Facebook page and go, well, let's raise Cain and get things going and get everybody mad and upset. But all you gotta do is talk to the people. They're all human beings. They're all here to do a good job. Are they perfect? No. Not everybody's perfect, but for some reason, concerned citizens of PWSD 1 think they're perfect. They're not. All I'm asking you to do is give these people a chance. Look, when I was on the water department, we had the American Missouri come out. When I first got on the water department years ago, and they were talking all this smack how good they were. Well, when I started going over things of all the bad reviews on them, they would shut down your local water department here. You have to pay the bills online or mail your bill. If you're a day late, guess what? They shut your water off. Then it might be days before they turn it back on. Then you gotta pay a big fee to get it turned back on. Okay? Then you're talking about leaks. It can take days for them to get out. And all this about people talking about fire hydrants. They're only talking about 13, not to your home. You're not gonna get a fire hydrant to your home, folks. It's only on 13 Highway. The mayor's been wanting it, and the city has been wanting it since I lived here, since January of 2017, because I talked to him. All right? So I know that. But just listen, we're all humans. We all live in this town. We want the best for what's this town, what it is. You know, give everybody a chance. Like I said, if you got a problem, talk to them. Don't get mad and upset. Look.
Don't file harassment charges on people.
Okay, let's stop complaining about everything on concerned citizens and talk to them normally.
I read that too. There's no complaining, there's fact.
This is how it's all about.
I'm sorry. All right, sorry.
If you have more questions, So someday, if you can, come talk to me about concerned citizens of PWSD, because I can't see it. I've been blocked from that group.
All right.
Appreciate it. Anybody else? Okay, we're gonna move on to, we're gonna revisit the rate increase. Alan, you wanna go over the last proposal that we're talking about?
Just to revisit the issue, my recommendation, unpopular though it may be, of course, as any district.
Grab the microphone, please.
My recommendation is that the current base rate of $26 or connection fee, whatever term you want to call, which is currently at $26.38 per month, remain the same, but it no longer will or should include 1,000 gallons of water. It should just be a connection fee for the district at $26.38. I have proposed to increase the usage rate to $8 per 1,000 gallons of water. It's hard for me to tell exactly what everybody, well, it's easy to tell what everybody's gallons will be if I knew what everybody used in gallons. All I can do is look at the total average customer's usage of 3,800 gallons per month. And if I apply that new rate increase, that would increase the customer bill on average at $3,800 per month to $56.78. I have done, in conjunction with this, a forecasted statement of revenues and expenses that would forecast the revenue that would be generated due to this increase in water rates. And that would increase our total revenue, which I think I mentioned earlier might be around $400,000 of revenue. I think that would increase the revenue if usage stayed consistent to $531,000. I have also projected the revenues or the expenses, and I think I also mentioned when I was going over the financial report, the biggest single uncertainty with projecting these expenses and looking at the monthly results is the system maintenance and repairs. I have some concern about that number, and we need to monitor that very closely and monitor the way the leaks are repaired. That takes both operations and financial analysis. That would need to go down to $120,000 and keep your total operating expenses somewhere around $370,000. Make an allowance every year of $50,000 without respect to any revenue bonds or borrowing, $50,000 just to improve your district for capital purchases. That would leave, if you could maintain that schedule, and the single biggest concern I would have with that is the $120,000 annual repairs and maintenance. Well, that seems not feasible for this district, and it hasn't been so far. It certainly is feasible for other districts. And what I don't know, because I don't have expertise in operations, is this district unique and different, and is their system aged enough where they really do need a lot more money in repairs and maintenance? Or with some controls and policy and procedures and careful monitoring, could it be reduced? I don't know the answer to that question. I can only speculate. But if it can be monitored and reduced, and the rate increase in place, then I'm projecting an excess, a surplus of $116,000. Whether that's to replenish reserves, to invest back in the district, to pay for debt financing, I don't know. But the first step would be maintain solvency and generate some more cash reserves than they have on hand currently. And so that's the basis of that rate increase. Though some may find it uncomfortably high, I find it necessary. I did do in conjunction with this rate increase, it did not influence it was for disclosure only. I didn't make any decision based on it. I took geographically speaking, your 5 closest districts. Got a couple in Taney County. I think you've got one to the south, Moark. There's one over in Stone County, and there's one a little bit to the west, Southwest Rural Water District. If I look at there, and I contacted all those districts to get their rates, and just for reference, the average of those 5 districts are $47.44. The proposed rate increase I have suggested is a little bit higher than that, $56.79, but it is based on my judgment of what the district needs right now to maintain solvencies and rebuild some reserves that can be used in a number of ways. So does that give you kind of the recap, Jason? That's where we kind of left it, as I remember.
So I know at our last discussion, Bob, you had talked about adjusting the rate to 30 for a base and 650 per 1,000 gallons. I believe that's what you had proposed, and sounded pretty agreeable with the rest of the board members. Virginia, I know you're new to this. I know they tried to get you caught up a little bit on the rates. Do you have any questions at all for Alan, or how we got to this point on our calculation? Bill, legal question. So when we approve a rate increase, you'll have to drop a resolution for us, correct?
Sure.
Could you pass it over? I believe that's one where the amounts are blank. So after stewing over the last month, Bob, you still feel comfortable with the 30 and the 650?
I do. I don't know if you had time to look at that and tell us what that was gonna come out to. I thought we were gonna get a handout.
It's not a material difference.
Nobody wants a rate
Between the two things.
They need money.
Philosophical difference between the two should be paying more. The difference is less. My guess is $10,000. My only concern with that is, as the water usage increases, then you get more customers, the revenue would down.
Well, this is one first step. I mean, we're not saying this is the end. But I think my calculation is that my rate is gonna come out to somewhere around.
They're trying to run it.
$53, give or take a little bit.
Less than 10,000.
Okay. So it's a little bit less than what you have recommended. I personally felt that that was the way to go.
James, did you have any input?
With it being a philosophical difference, I would take your expertise anyway. Sorry, but as far as with the differences between Bob's or yours, you know what you're doing. If that's the best course of action, where we're still keeping them fairly low, we're not bombing people's mailboxes and our mailboxes as well, because we live within the district too. I think either way, it's comfortable with.
So the difference between keeping the base rate the way it was and increasing the volumetric rate versus increasing the base rate and doing a lesser increase in the volumetric rate, the discussion originally was that people who are here seasonally would be paying a larger base rate even when they're not using the water district. So therefore, the longtime residents would see a lesser strike, or year-round residents would see a lesser strike, but it's just a different way of calculating to get to the same number. Virginia, did you have any input on that? So the two competing ideas, what Alan originally said with his rate study was keeping the base rate at 26.38. It would not include 1,000 gallons. And for every 1,000 gallons used after that would be $8 per 1,000 gallons. And then the other option would be a $30 base rate with $6.50 as a volumetric rate. The base rate would also not include 1,000 gallons. You guys have a preference on which way you want to go, and right. So somebody want to make a motion to approve one, to vote on one of these rates?
I'll make a motion.
On which one?
2639.
Yep. I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded, is there any additional discussion on the motion? All in favor, aye? Aye. Aye. Nay. The vote is 3-1, the rate increase passed at keeping the volumetric rate, or the base rate at 26.38, not including 1,000 gallons, and the, for every 1,000 gallons purchased would be $8.
Jason, can I just make an observation?
Yes.
Just in the future meetings, if we had copies of the agenda and those rates, that would have been very helpful.
Okay.
Just for the future.
When does that take effect? It'll take effect next billing cycle. Won't change the sewer bill. Sewer bill's the city.
Your sewer bill is based on your water usage.
Okay, the next item on the agenda under old business is a resolution calling for the election on the question whether to issue waterworks system revenue bonds. We originally discussed based on our engineers.
Point of order. The agenda that was posted last night at approximately 10 p.m. has nothing about the bond resolution.
It was a tentative agenda under the statute, and the bond resolution was added to it.
And was that voted on?
Doesn't have to be voted on, it's a tentative resolution, the bond issue was added. You'll find it in the statute.
So we had discussed a $10 million potential bond, revenue bond to go to the elections. It has to be voted on the board, and then it doesn't mean we're borrowing $10 million. It means that it gives the water district the ability to borrow up to that amount. You use that bond issue, once it's approved, to go after grant money to hopefully offset the cost of any major repairs, major upgrades.
How much will our bills go up if you get a $5 million or a $10 million? How much will your bills go up?
This is a bond issue just to approve $10 million for potential expenditures. We can't borrow a dime without the approval.
I know, but
Right. So the resolution is in your packets. Do I have anybody who has any questions on the resolution? And do I hear a motion to approve the resolution for $10 million?
The gentleman asked how much it would cost for $5 million. What would be the estimate that would raise our
No, all it is just to talk about.
I want to hear that from the board, please.
But if we want to know, so we can tell the board if they should approve it or not.
If we make a $5 million repair, the intent would be to get as much grant money as we could to keep that cost down. We have to have the ability to borrow to cover the other expenditures. Our side, our portion of that upgrade, and the bond issue gives us permission the public gives us permission to borrow the money to do that. Doesn't mean that we're going to go out and spend $10 million or $5 million. It's going to be based on the engineering study, and then our engineer will help us work on grants in order to help pay for that and offset the cost. So we don't have a number right now for that expense.
Does the public have to approve the bond if you get it?
What was that? Yes, we're voting on to go to election. Yeah. It's got to go on.
We all know that this district needs more than $10 million. So let's just say $10 million, you need it. So you might get a grant for 50% of that. So we have to assume that you're gonna you're gonna try to spend $5 million. That's rational. Yeah, I mean, you need it bad. The engineer is telling you, you need more than that. You've got a 70% leak rate average. How much is $5 million that you're gonna have to spend that you don't get grants on going to cost us on our bill, on that average bill that he figured out?
we will be able to answer that when the engineer completes the study, and we determine how much we're actually gonna borrow.
Cost another $1 million.
So we're
So
gonna-
another 40 bucks.
Guys, we're past the public part, we need to move on with.
I don't think you need to be past the public part on this one.
What's your accountant have to say?
So, do you guys have an amount that you wanted? I know we just discussed, going for the 10 million based on our attorney's recommendation. Do you guys want to set an amount there and make a motion to approve this resolution?
Yeah, we're just trying to see if we can get it to an election. So it's kind of 10 million.
I entertain a motion to approve the resolution calling for an election for revenue bond to go to the public for $10 million. $10 million bond. Motion's been made.
Okay.
Point of order. This resolution's already been passed on April 22nd, 2024. So you guys are actually voting again on a resolution that you've already passed at a previous meeting. I have the minutes. I can't pull them up here. I have the video if you'd like to see it.
If we see what you have, we believe here that it was tabled at that time.
No, it was not. There was a vote. You read the entire resolution. You had your book. There was a vote. Bob Williams wanted it to be $12 million. He was newly appointed to the board. He said he was going to reserve his vote. Jason went ahead and pushed it through for a $10 million bond. You read the resolution.
In your view, you think there was a vote?
It is not my view. If anybody wants to see the video, I have it.
I'm trying to find out what you're saying. Are you saying?
You've already passed this and you're doing it again. It's a joke.
Well, there's no problem, and I do have an opportunity to know about it, and they can pass as many resolutions as they want.
You're passing the same resolution. Nobody remembers it.
Let me respond. If they're doing it twice, it's a duplicate of the original, and there is no harm.
It's also a sign of incompetence.
All in favor? Aye. There is no new business on the agenda.
I just wanted to be stated, I mentioned this in your email, I got loud enough. Mr. Mark Mills, contacted the office, sorry, I don't want to use the microphone. He had a leak, and he had been in this home for 17 years. And at this time, he had a PRV failure. And he was pretty concerned about it, he called Bud and I several times and visited with us about it. But it was his personal PRV, and he would come into the office and visit with us about it, and he was kind of upset. And so I asked him how he would like to proceed, and he said he would like me to bring it to the board, which I am, to see if there was anything that could be done about this PRV. Knowing how the board stands and our bylaws and what our contract says, I know what the answer will be, but I told him I would do it, and so here we are. So,
I believe we follow the office policy.
okay.
Anybody else have any input on that? It's beyond me or the customer's responsibility. Before I close out the meeting, Amanda, I know that you and Mona were gathering because one of the recommendations from Richard was that we look at doing contracts for our dirt work.
Yes.
I know you guys are starting to gather the information of the contractors that we currently use, as well as speaking with other water districts to kind of get a roadmap on how they do it. We can improve that process. Because Alan says we should do it. Obviously, this is something that's going to help us control costs.
Yeah, we have reached out to and emailed, I think I emailed probably, and spoke on the phone, probably 6 or 7 different types of contractors, plumbers, excavators, plumber and excavators, businesses, private individuals, and they were all agreeable to fill out the document that we drafted for them. It basically asked for general rates, emergency rates, that type of thing. And so far, was that 2 weeks ago we did that? It was about 2 weeks ago we did that, and we've gotten 1 response.
we are getting the rate structure for people that we currently use in writing. So that
We already have that.
Anything else? Yep, go ahead.
I guess we're ready for those 6 questions. And now, the way we're gonna handle this is we've got the questions, we're gonna try to give you information, and we're gonna try to give you expert information. We're gonna ask the CPA, the engineer, and the attorney to reflect on each question, what they think is relevant with respect to how it should be answered and what the circumstances are that would bear on those issues. Do you understand? Not gonna debate it, not gonna fuss with anybody that made the question, but we're gonna give you the information we can about these things so you are fully informed, at least what we have here in the experience that you have here. We do have an engineer here with considerable experience and a CPA with considerable experience, and some people think I know what my mother thinks I think I know what I'm doing. But anyway, we'll give you the answers that we can. The first question was Charlie's, and Charlie wanted to know about what the solvency of the district was, and I think that probably would be a question for the CPA primarily, because the impact of the current resolution they just adopted will be part of that.
With respect to solvency, I may have answered some of those questions or not, or provided some information in the financial report. So if you have another question, ask about it. The district is not, in terms of daily operations, at risk of becoming insolvent or not being able to pay its bills. My suggestion on the rate increase is to maintain that it ensures solvency in the future. How much of that rate increase goes into a future reserve fund to handle district improvements, I can't say, because I still believe, and maybe this is from a cautiously optimistic approach, that there is room to control some expenditures on the system maintenance and repairs. I can't say that definitively without being an expert in operations, but I am hopeful. If I'm wrong and these expenditures continue to stay high, my belief is the rate increase that I suggested and that they have approved tonight will maintain solvency for the district. There is not a lot of cash reserve for the district. It needs to be improved. There's room for improvement, but I think it can be handled. With respect to some of the questions about what will happen to the rates in the future, those don't really directly relate to solvency in my mind. They really relate to what it's going to cost to get this district operational in an efficient way with equipment and infrastructure that is adequate to serve the needs of the customers. And I don't want to tap dance or be a politician, but I simply cannot answer that question until I have more accurate information on what the cost will be, what the terms of any financing will be, how much grants will be available to pay for it. Without doing that, without having those numbers, I'm guessing. And if I'm guessing, I'm not providing any information to the district. The rates may be sufficient. There is room, if the costs are controlled at the rate I suggested, to have potentially $100,000 of surplus cash flow. But there's also the possibility that it's woefully inadequate, and if there is a $5 million with no grants and the interest rates are high, that the rates could go up by another $40. I don't know, and the only thing I can guarantee is that we'll just evaluate this every single year and provide our honest opinion on what it is based on the facts that have some basis in reality or truth, whether that are instead of a projection that I just don't have any faith in and no knowledge of whether or not it's accurate. That's all I can really say. But I am not concerned that on a daily basis or monthly basis in the next 12 months, the district will not be solved.
That's our CPA's comment, and the engineering and legal can't add anything to that. Now, Joe asked the question, and he wanted to know precisely at the moment what the district has in reserve in the bank. If you happen to have that figure.
Just to reiterate, and this number is at the end of July, the August bank statement's not out yet. At the end of July, the cash in the bank accounts, deposit accounts, $47,028. Certificates of deposit at various banks, $291,087. So that's a total, I didn't add that up in my head, but that's somewhere near $340,000. And then for your reference, I expect the annual expenditures for the district to be $350 and $400 between 450,000. That is not much reserve, there's no question about that. The district does have an advantage that most businesses don't have. The district has a stable customer base that is paying money every single month. So the ability to maintain a slim margin of operational reserve is possible because it has steady income that a regular for-profit business may not have. But there is a lot of room for improvement, and we need to see that improve. Does that answer the question about reserves?
The next issue was Richard's question, and he wanted to know whether there's adequate consideration, I believe his question was, that of other options, that the district might be dissolved and a utility might take it over, I believe. And I do think the president has mentioned that discussion, and that there's ongoing concern or ongoing discussion about it. I can't add anything. Engineering and CPA, can you add anything? So I think for Richard's question, the answer is it's being discussed, has been, and will be more. Tom had a question, and Tom, it's the one that I can't read my own writing. Are you still back there?
Right here.
What was your question?
Well, I do know that they can get a grant, even with private money. In my business, we deal with grants. And it's not based, there was a comment there, there's usually a high income area, there won't be grants available. That's not a true statement. Grants are allocated all over the country for a variety of different reasons.
Okay.
So regardless how they're gonna get their funds, grants are available.
The fourth issue that you want to discuss was Dawn's number one, and I believe that Dawn was asking us how the rates are set by the board, how they're calculated, I believe. And was that correct?
I'm not Dawn.
I'm looking at Dawn back there.
No, I think my question was all for the past year and a half, all I've heard was how concerned these citizens and residents are about keeping their rates low. But it appears that's not the direction we're going. So
Well, let me give it back to the CPA so he can give you what the performance financially has been the last year and why he's recommending a rate increase.
I know why he's
We'll give him,
recommending it.
you want more, let's give him 2 minutes to summarize it in a few sentences, so that we don't delay it unduly.
It probably is true that I'm the driving force behind the higher rate increases. I mean, so you can throw stones or you can cast aspersions for me. The board probably does want the rates to be low. I can't speak for any of them individually, but I'm sure as customers themselves and as representative of the customers, they would like them to be lower. And I would like them to be lower as an individual, but as a professional, I just do not have a comfort level that you can keep them at the same way they are, or increase them to less than I have suggested without risking the solvency that you all crave so much and you need so much. And so that was the basis. It was solely my discretion, and it wasn't just something I pulled out of the air. It was something we spent a lot of time calculating and forecasting and projection and doing projections and reviewing past financial performance and trying to put this district in a position to protect the customers, as unpopular as it might be. And that's the reason that I've increased the rates since I have been hired on board, suggested that the rates go higher. And I can't speak for what the board's intent was in the past, but the increase was from me.
And Alan, I'm not disagreeing with you. I truly believe that rates need to be increased, but I've heard argument and argument and argument time and time again. We don't want our rates to go up. Well, our rates are going to go up higher than an entity that already has the resources to help our water system, but the PWSD is bringing the rates up extremely higher than those rates right now. So that is just the point I wanted to make. So I agree, our rates need to go up, but all I've heard for a year and a half, it doesn't match with what I've been hearing. So thank you.
Dawn's question number 2, or the issue that she brought up second, which is the last one, is really a challenging one and has to do with the question of whether or not the district is here for the good of the community as a whole, or whether we're here to provide water for a certain group of people. I'm gonna let both of these fellows here, the experts, talk about what they've learned in the years that they've been doing things, and I'm gonna mention what I know about this particular problem. As to whether it's, there are special groups that are favored in this kind of thing, it is true that USDA financing will not come in and help developers. And I think the DNR generally handles that. In other words, this financing from the government is not to promote profits for developers. It's to bring water for residential use of families. And so you could argue that the policy of this district and the organization of the district, you can argue, is devoted to getting water to existing residents who need it. And it could say that may not be consistent with the good of the community. And so there's an issue here about that you all are all concerned about whether you can go to public utility and save money. And I want to tell you as an attorney, I've worked in this area now for more years than most of you, or some of you are alive. And I can tell you this about a rural water district. A rural water district cannot do anything except what elected officials do. They can be thrown out of office if they do something in the next vote, if they do something that the public doesn't like. A rural water district is a governmental entity, and it is not taxed on sales tax on the assets that it has to purchase to put in the ground. A private utility is taxed on that stuff. A public utility, excuse me, is taxed. A rural water district, in other words, can build at cost. The other thing that is really relevant is that a rural water district, being a governmental entity, is not subject to state or federal income tax. And your district here can operate with no reserves for a 20% cut to the feds and a 6% cut to the state of the profits that are on the book. And we don't have to worry about depreciation. What we have to worry about here is getting enough money for the district to try to replace and repair the assets that are necessary to keep your district going. And your headache here, very frankly, is that the system has not been kept up the way it really should have been, and this massive increase would not, that the CPA says you really need for security and safety, would not occur. So insofar as I can answer those questions, I think that has to do with whether this is good for the community and whether or not it's to help individuals or make profit for the rich and for the rich.
I don't think that's very fair.
What's the truth?
It is not.
Ma'am, I don't know
No.
how many districts you represent, but
I
I
have-
represent a number.
I have been in city
I'm not
government.
That's insulting.
That
We
is
are
very
not arguing.
insulting.
We
Well,
are
you
not
are
arguing.
arguing with me, sir, and that is not an accurate statement.
I'll just add a quick 2 cents here. I worked with several cities and districts, and I'll admit that this situation is really unique. And I can't say that I've got another similar situation that I can say, hey, here's somebody else that went through the same thing and came out, and here's how they did it. I do know that I've worked with a lot of cities that have to face this issue of rate increases, bond issues, and a lot of them ask, well, how come we have to replace this system? And unfortunately, it's just bad timing in a lot of circumstances. You know, the 70s brought to us a lot of financing, government financing to build these systems. USDA helped put the original Stone 1 system in. And now that we're 50 years later, those materials are simply, they're at the end of their life. And to be able to fix everything along the way and raise rates just right along the way just isn't, it's ideal. It's very philosophical, but it's not realistic. Human nature, when it comes to underground utilities, we got at least two things that work against us in human nature. One is if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And so if the utility's out, if you can't see it, you don't know what condition it's in. The other thing is if it's not broke, don't fix it. And if you want to keep rates low, you don't just go around fixing things that aren't even broken. You wait till they break and then you fix them. Unfortunately, those two frugal efforts end up eventually coming to an end. And I see it in a lot of cities and districts that here we are 50 years later, we have to replace or reline or upgrade or add additional components to many things. And unfortunately, it's just what happens after 50 years of a massive investment in our nation in the 70s. Here we are 50 years later, and those things, they're actually beyond their useful life. Usually we say we plan for things to last 20 to 30 years, and here we are getting 50 years out of things. So it's just that our time's up on a lot of these utilities.
Jared, just to kind of piggyback, like you said, in your experience, we're kind of unique, but in other water districts that you represent and you work with, when they're working on such things like bonds, are they planning for growth? Is that kind of a common thing, to plan for growth, whether it be residential or commercial?
They don't plan to finance growth. They put that on developers, has been my experience. The funding mechanisms that the clients that I work with utilize, the DNRs, the USDAs, CDBGs, those funding agencies are not looking to put things in the ground for future. They're saying, okay, you need to show us that you have a need, which means that you're already beyond the point of having what you need in place, and then let's talk about how we can work together to finance that. But many of those agencies simply, they won't let you account for fire flow. They won't let you extend out to an area that doesn't have customers pay for it.
But that's for grants. The district as a whole, like, just do you see them seeking out private financing to plan for that?
My plan is to see if there's any leverage, any capability of getting grants through DNR's Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. I've got a handful of those types of projects going on, and there's always nuances to them, but one of the things I've got on my to-do list is find out if any kind of grant money is available through the SRF program prior to raising rates to the point where they're at 2% of the median household income, because it's at that threshold that folks like USDA and CDBG will start to bend and start to open up their grant money vault. But 2% of this area's MHI ends up being a water bill of over $80 a month, and that's what we're trying to avoid, getting up there.
I agree with what you're saying, Jerry. And yes, developers do participate a lot of times in providing water. However, this city is so unique that we can't get development in here because we have 5 different water districts. We do not have centralized water. People want this, people want that. Nobody is going to come in here because we don't have a centralized water system. We have 5 different water districts. Our comprehensive plan, which our citizens helped develop, Jason helped develop because he was on planning and zoning, says this city has got to have centralized water. So my question is PWSD in the position, and are you going to work towards becoming the centralized water of Kimberling City? And what I'm hearing is no. Well, that's what I'm hearing, sir.
Folks, rural water districts combine without any problem whatsoever.
I understand they can
And-
combine.
And that can be done. You can sell all these systems to a public utility. The public utility is gonna pay tax on profits, and it's gonna pay tax on what it builds.
I know all that.
Okay, now we've answered your questions, and we're not gonna debate anything.
I'm not
further.
debating
We're not
you.
here to argue.
I'm not arguing with you. I was trying to get my question answered.
Having no, if I may,
Please.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
as I mentioned earlier, we have reopened discussions with Missouri American.
Agreed, Bob, and thank you.
And that's one way that we're looking at. We're, as a board, we're looking at all of the options.
Is it just you or the entire board? I'm sorry, I just need to know.
We appointed one person and Bob volunteered to do it.
Thank you, Bob.
But we're talking about all the options. We have to prepare ourselves no matter what might happen. Missouri American is one option.
Yes.
We have to look at, the other things that we discussed here tonight. So, in my mind, it's not as bleak and dreary as it might appear. It's just not. But I guess that's opinions are opinions.
You
We'll
do
see.
realize we
We'll
leak
see.
3 out of 4 gallons. I mean, for every gallon that I use at my house.
We were leaking 3 out of every 4.
You
We have-
recalculated
We have
it.
been making improvements, and that's why we have got a lot of debt at the first part of the year.
Bob, I will sit down with you and if you look at the raw numbers and go by what they were doing in January, February, and March, it's a shell game that has been done starting in
No
April.
matter what we want to
You can
say,
account for the leaks all you want, it's still leaky.
Things are improving.
Not with
$11
raw
million
numbers.
with 11 million gallons with 7 million gallons leaked is not 30%.
I'm gonna thank everybody for coming out, I appreciate it. And I apologize again for being late, I had a job that ran long. Board meetings are always open to the public, so thank you. Having no more business, the meeting stands adjourned.